Good. Now meeting to order. Next slide. Approval of the agenda. Should we mention at this point that we're gonna talk a little bit about wastewater and new business?
Yeah. No old business.
It's all, yeah,
Old
I
business.
guess it is old business. Really old business.
Yeah, okay, we'll add it in there.
And I've got a little update on the River Aware app, but not much. I've contacted the engineering firm putting it together. But I thought I'd start. Was a little late, but
Yeah, I got a couple of Morgan's emails from today too. Okay, anything else? Good, all those in favor?
I
Opposed? Approved. Approval of the April minutes. I didn't see anything outstanding. Motion to approve. Motion to approve.
have a second.
That's right, yeah. We have, okay, good. Approve, okay, approve. Aye. Right. So moved. And Matthew, Matt or Matthew?
Matt, yeah,
Me too.
yeah.
So we have a few questions for you, and you probably have some answers.
Well,
for
it's
us.
the cleanest thing in the world, it was,
I was gonna need to sing.
that's right. Exactly.
Fine,
It is dry, I bet it smells fresh too.
I guess Kurt.
yeah, Kathy, you online with us? Just go and move you.
Oh dear.
Okay, we have one on with us.
Yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I think I may have mentioned, so we, Wyndham Regional Commission is the regional planning commission that supports Grafton. I know Eric he serves on the commission for the town. Every 8 years, we're required to meet with our towns at least twice to do a formal municipal consultation. We are of course available to meet with you more often than that, but we're required to at least do it twice every 8 years. So this is kind of the formal municipal consultation, but it really is meant just to be a conversation, just to kind of check in with the planning commission and see how your work is going. I know the commission has been having discussions about your town plan update, so happy to answer questions about that, kind of where you are at in that project. Possibility of applying for a municipal planning grant, how WRC can provide support for that town plan update project. But then also just in general, if there are other projects that you've been working on as a planning commission that you have questions about or need assistance, I'm happy to respond to any questions. So yeah, the municipal consultation makes it sound very formal, but I like to just have kind of an informal conversation. And yeah,
So this is the first one you've done with us, right, since
I
8 years?
yeah, the first one I've been with Wyndham Regional for about 3 years. Yeah, I'm not sure how long you all have been on the planning commission for Grafton, if you recall. Us.
I think this actually may have been the
Yeah.
last time here.
Okay.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was before,
Hmm?
it was before this time plan, though, right? A number of years.
I think he was here more recently in the capacity of when Matt is talking about town consultation. We had a good deal of support from WRC when we did our last town plan revision.
Yeah.
So many objectives, and we'll read you here tonight.
Yeah. Yeah.
The. The prospect of finishing up our town plan update. Will probably be very greatly facilitated by hiring probably you from WRC to help with us in the latter stages of the operation, and perhaps just kind of guidance, hitting us side ahead with a 2x4 every once in a while to and get us following the right path down that direction of getting it done. And for that, we'll probably apply for an NS planning grant to support your efforts. And in the interim, and I know this is probably one of your toughest jobs at WRC, is reconciling town plans with legislation.
Yep.
And we have one sticky wicket that I dislike from Agency of Natural Resources, and it's called reporters. To the extent possible, we would wish they didn't exist, because we don't like the basis on which they were formed.
Yeah.
In concept, they're okay, but in order to be scientific, they'd have to go about it in a different way. And I don't believe that there's a reasonable spelled out appeals process like there would be for the National Flood Insurance Program, where you can say, oh, I disagree with you, and hire an engineer and do all the due diligence. I don't think there's any of that available through an A&R. They've just taken a big broad brush and gone down the river watershed, and if you haven't fallen inside of that broad brush, your property rights are compromised. That's that's my opinion anyway. So to the extent that you can guide us in how the river corridors might be addressed in the town plan and still have it pass muster at the state.
Yeah.
That would be really nice.
Yeah, and I'm assuming I've looked through the town plan, I haven't looked through it in detail, but I'm assuming there's something currently in your town plan about river corridors?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, cause I know those went into effect. Definitely before the last time the town plan was done in 2020, like the new requirements for addressing flood resiliency in your town plan, so. So it's in there currently, and are you kind of speaking to, because the state will be having statewide river corridor regulations going into effect, I believe, 2028. I don't know if you,
I don't know if that was in the
yeah,
most recent legislation as an effective date.
yeah, I know that was, yeah, and the legislation that passed 2024. Yeah, but that's more, that statewide river corridor regulations, that's less to do with your town plan. And it's more to do with just the permitting and regulation process.
Right. If I recall properly, they relaxed some of the regulations relative to dense clusters of housing, or one house would shadow another. And sort of in compensation for that, they made the regulations tougher. Outside of that,
Yeah,
it's the tougher part, and avoid as much as possible.
yeah, 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 that might be the Act 250 reforms, is that what
Well,
you're referring to? Or-
I might have that confused. But I thought it had to do with the river corridor designation,
Oh, yeah,
maybe,
maybe connected to, but, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I do think, I mean, so your current town plan, you know, there have been changes in statute for requirements for your town plan since 2020. But there haven't been any changes to the requirements for the flood resilience element, so if what you have in there was reviewed and approved by WRC in 2020 as meeting the statutory requiremements. There may be some minor updates you need to make, but I would think you would be in pretty good shape for the river corridor requirements, just because there haven't been changes in statute, at least with the town plan requirements.
not even in last year's legislation.
No, so it was, I mean, the big change was this statewide permitting that they're gonna have for development in river corridor areas. And so that's something that is still in the rulemaking process.
Oh,
Yeah, so, and Alyssa at our office, Alyssa Sabeto, who's our emergency management planner, has definitely been more involved in keeping up to speed on where things are at the state level with developing those statewide river corridor regulations and the exact rollout of that and the rulemaking process, but those rules are still being developed. But I mean, the long and short of it is in 2028, there will be statewide regulations for mapped river corridor areas, whether or not a town has adopted its own local bylaws to address that. So I know Grafton has subdivision bylaws. Do you have flood hazard
yes.
bylaws? But yeah. And so it would be similar to that, the river corridor regulations would be similar to what's required under your flood hazard bylaw, but the exact area that falls within that is a little different.
Our flood hazard bylaw, basically follows the National Flood Defense Program.
Yeah.
And we made mention of river corridors,
Mhm.
the flood resilience chapter of
Yeah.
this particular
Yeah,
edition of the town plan.
yeah,
There was a little bit of a negotiation with the language
yeah,
of what we have. But what you're saying is in 2028, it's gonna be on all streams, all towns regardless of whether
yeah.
they want it or not.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, I mean, this legislation was passed last year in 2024. There is gonna be that rulemaking process, whether it really goes into effect in 2028 or if things get delayed, because developing something like this will take time. But I know that, and I don't have the exact dates in my head, but I know the legislation that was passed last year included specific dates of when it's supposed to go into effect.
Does everyone here know what the rule-making process is up there in legislation?
I don't know how they covered some of that in the training.
Basically, the legislators can create a statute,
Yeah,
and then the
and then they,
affected agencies.
Yeah.
In this case, it's probably A&R,
Mhm.
is gonna have, then say, this is how that statute is going to be applied to people.
Yeah,
And it goes through a, kind of I consider it almost like a secret process, there's a bunch of legislators that get together with the A&R folks, and they all do a bunch of rules that may or may not, well, they have to follow the statute, but they can be,
They have,
substantially different.
they have broad discretion.
Yes. Run into this with electrical permitting that I've seen happen where stuff is in statute one way and then they make rules that are very specific to it that have input from a bunch of different agencies. It's not like you can come in with a legislative feed on something and see what's going on. This is, but the rulemaking process is quite consequential.
Yeah,
So what's, I know there's a roundtable this week, she's putting on,
and,
yeah,
Mhm.
it's on Act 121.
yeah, so that's the piece of legislation. I couldn't remember the number, but yeah, Act 121. That's the legislation that is creating the statewide river corridor regulating and permitting process, so.
So
Yeah.
you're meeting on, there's a meeting it's roundtable, Tuesday, May 20th, 12 to 1:30 p.m. in your office on Main Street.
Mhm.
It's a tough one to make.
Yeah, I can say, I'm assuming that it's gonna be recorded.
I think she, yes, she did say
Yeah.
it's gonna be recorded,
Okay.
but we won't be able to provide any feedback. Or will we? I mean, not, at least not immediate, yeah, that's got that roundtable, but
Yeah,
kind of afterthought.
yeah, and I can, I know that it's happening, I don't know the details on the event, but I know that. So like with the rulemaking process, there are always opportunities for, public input, for reviewing, what's being proposed, that's obviously handled at the state level, and again, I don't know exactly where they're at. In that rulemaking development process, but I think if you're not able to attend the roundtable, I think you're able to. View the recording, and if you have questions, you can send those to Alyssa. That's probably the best.
Yeah, yeah, so she answered me right.
Okay.
There's no way I can make it at that time. in
Yeah.
downtown
Yeah,
Brattleboro at the lunch hour, yeah.
Perhaps give them some written comments.
Yeah. Did you know about this?
I'm pretty sure I sent that notice, yeah.
yeah,
Did
Yeah,
you?
I saw the email.
I mean, I can't get on it.
Be out of state.
Yeah, so. So this is an opportunity though to shape how it's gonna be handled on our level here,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I mean, I think it's one of, well, there will be other opportunities. I would say just because it is gonna be a lengthy process to go through all this, so it's not the only opportunity.
And this is for 2028,
That's right, yeah,
so we're still working on it.
yeah, 3 years.
Okay.
3 years out, so, yeah,
Okay.
but it takes time. To develop something like this and figure out how they're gonna staff it and handle it administratively and. So it's,
Part of the purpose of the meeting next week is
Yeah.
just explanatory, just to.
that's my understanding, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm planning on attending myself, because as you can see, I know a little about it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
A lot to speak with a lot of authority on it,
But it will play a factor in our new town plan. Perhaps,
yeah, I mean, I think,
Timing is a little tricky if it's 2028,
yeah,
and they're gonna overlap, so.
Yeah.
We may have to, depending on the timing, just reference that there's regulations coming.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
if it comes out in 2028, we're releasing it in 2028.
Yeah, and I think I would probably advise. That would probably be kind of the extent of, how I would address it in your town plan, it's just, talk about. River corridors, their location in town, at that point, we will know more about the kind of where things are at with the rulemaking process, and so. You could just provide information in the town plan about, this is what is being proposed by the state, and it's planning on, the plan is for it to go into effect on such and such a date. in 2028. But it's not, because your town plan, the town plan is it's an advisory document, it's not a regulatory document, I think just speaking to this other process that's happening is sufficient, because this, I mean, the state is managing that process and they've mapped out the river corridors, and it's gonna be imposed on every town. But I think it's important to, like, obviously acknowledge it and recognize it in your plan, but there's not much. There's not much say, I guess, you have in the town plan about whether or not it happens or how it happens, it's just gonna be.
So statewide, it's potentially something that could take away development areas for new housing. Or
Yes.
commercial ventures.
There's, yeah, and so there's that potential, I mean, I understand, I understand why it's being put in place, I understand the perspective about, you know, the impact on property owners' rights, I think. The intent of the legislation was, concerns about those areas that are vulnerable to fluvial erosion, flooding in those river corridor areas, and right now, most towns have flood hazard bylaws like Grafton, but the number of towns that have river corridor regulations is much smaller, and so I think from the state's perspective, they see it as a statewide issue of needing to manage how development happens in these flood prone areas and how, you know, what happens upstream from Grafton is gonna affect you too, so if. You know, I don't know exactly how waterways flow through Grafton, but if Wyndham is doing something that's creating additional flooding downstream. You know, that's, there's that opportunity for, it's a reason to have statewide regulations like this. Because each town is making its own decisions at the local level, but that's the other perspective, I'm just kind of representing that, I'm not saying one viewpoint is right or wrong, but. I think that's why it's been put in place.
So it seems to have been implemented in the most convenient way. Just taking an arbitrary width essentially and drawing it around the existing water course. It does not take into account elevation, it does not take into account the kind of material that is on the bank, whether it's ledge or gravel.
Yeah,
It also has a quirky, as far as I can tell, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But it regards highways as being some kind of a barrier, so the river corridor doesn't extend to the other side of the highway. Even though the land there might be at river level and would be where the water would go in a flood. But yet, if there's a road there, the river corridor is over here in land that doesn't have the road. That's kind of weird.
yeah,
So it's a scientific basis for which the river corridor has been established that really kind of plugs in like, oh, it's just, damn it, they should make it a scientific basis, not just an arbitrary
yeah,
brush stroke.
yeah, and, you know, definitely understand that perspective, you know, when I'm saying, you know, the intent behind it is to, you know, minimize development in those flood prone areas, to your point, if it's not being done scientifically, is it really identifying flood prone areas, or is it also including areas that?
If it were all, if the floodplain were all basically close to the same elevation, close to the same geology on either side of the river. Yeah, that makes sense, that's, you know, it's got an average chance of going either way, but it's barreling down through these valleys. And the river is being turned by a ledge that if you're sitting 30 feet in elevation higher on top of a ledge, you shouldn't be in the damn river corner.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm not sure, I mean, I know the state, right, obviously they've mapped out river corridors. I'm not sure if they're gonna go through a process of updating that mapping, and going through this. As they go through this rulemaking process, I'm not sure if those. River corridor maps will be updated, that's something I'm interested in learning about,
What if the town provided the data, because we've done,
Yeah,
a little bit of, alluvial erosion,
Mhm.
analysis.
Yep.
In the Saxons River. Fitzgerald Associates
okay,
worked on the river here, but they don't have. Elevations, that was before we had, LiDAR. And I was hoping when LiDAR came out that A&R would say, oh, well, okay, we've got a better basis for the river corridor, now let's adjust it. As far as I know, that hasn't happened.
You think you could do it with drones, just mapping
Hmm,
elevations all the way right down the river?
Well,
yeah,
that's what the LiDAR did for us.
Yeah,
yeah,
That's really detailed.
yeah,
So wouldn't one of the issues then be whether, Act 21 allows for, local adjustments?
yeah, my understanding is it allows for. A town to be. More strict, I guess, in the regulations, but not. More lenient, so it would kind of start at base level statewide, and then. If the town wanted to take it further, they could.
So then, Eric's example where something is in the river corridor,
Mhm.
but it's clearly
Yeah,
not an issue to worry about.
Yeah.
Flows. So then the possibility of adjusting that would be
yeah,
quite difficult, if not impossible.
Well,
yeah,
it does say in this Act 121 that part of their, brief is to set forth a process for amending the statewide river corridor basement.
yeah, I would have to imagine, like, they will need to have some sort of appeal and adjustment process, like they do.
Appeal and adjustment is something that's.
How easy that is, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it needs to be there.
Yeah, yeah,
This isn't actually saying appeal and adjustment, but for amending.
Yeah,
So I
that
don't know
sounds
if that's
like
the
a
entire.
macro kind
Yeah.
of change. I'm
Yeah.
talking about,
yeah,
hey, I'm not gonna get flooded,
right,
I can prove it to you on the basis of an engineer
yeah,
analysis. I want to be removed from the regulations
yeah,
of the river corridor,
yeah,
that should be possible.
yeah, and that's right, what they have. With the FEMA bylaws, there's a process for that, and
Yeah,
that gets filed in the town records, and yeah.
yeah, it's, letter map adjustment.
so what happened to the terms floodway and floodplain?
So we still have those, and let's see, so the flood. The floodway is the primary area that's prone to flooding, and then the. The floodplain is the adjacent area,
Usually the 100 year,
yeah, and so
floodplain.
that is under the. The flood hazard bylaws, like the FEMA flood hazard bylaws, river corridors is just, it's only a Vermont thing as far as I know.
Yeah,
So,
so floodway, floodplain were created by elevations. No elevation.
Yes, almost exclusively.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
They're not real accurate, but they're not bad, but they are. Amendable and on appeal. We've had that done several times already.
I think river corridor, if I remember right, it was explained to me once as. The way the river would want to flow,
that's right, yeah. Mhm.
regardless of elevation.
Yeah.
Like if it's washing into an embankment,
Mhm.
that's the force that it wants to go.
Yeah. It's kind of the natural meander, right, of the river. And we've made constraints through infrastructure and other means to kind of make the river go in another direction. And then that can, right, that's where a lot of the damage to our road infrastructure happened. The road built right up along the river the river wants to still go into the embankment where the road is, and it carves away and the road collapses. So it's different, there's a lot of overlap between, the flood hazard areas and the river corridor areas, but there are definitely areas where they kind of diverge, and a lot of the property damage and infrastructure damage we see in Vermont, a lot of that is in the areas that are river corridors and not flood hazard areas, and so people are used to knowing about flood hazard areas and maybe are familiar with FEMA's flood hazard maps and know if they're in a vulnerable place, but are less familiar with those river corridor vulnerabilities. So that's something we're all learning about.
Are you familiar with the Whetstone?
Mhm.
You know what they did
Yeah.
to see what happened?
Are you like the floodplain management?
The floodplain
Yeah,
that turned into a river corridor,
okay,
because the river said, oh, I can go
Yeah.
this way now.
yeah. Interesting, yeah,
And it's heading straight for, it's not heading for the bridge overflow that they created, it's heading back toward the road that they built to get over
yeah,
to the apartments.
I didn't realize that, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
it flooded twice, we fixed it once, we worked on the
Okay.
project. And then the second time, they said, no, that's
Yeah.
where we want to go now, so they literally changed the river,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's very.
curious where that engineering, if they look back to that engineering and what they did wrong, you know,
Yeah. It's complicated.
it is,
No,
yeah, that was
where
very
water's gonna go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. The idea was that they didn't have backup, they had a place to back up
Right,
into this area.
Yeah.
like a 2 acre area.
Yeah.
3 acre area.
yeah, just to kind of hold it.
Yeah.
Let water levels, lower and then,
Which it should still do if
Yeah.
they were to back up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Are there, I know you've started looking at the town plan, are there other areas other than?
Well, at some point, I think your expertise, or at least Wyndham Regionals, perhaps through you, will be able to help us with all of this, demographic update.
Yeah.
It's basically the boilerplate data that we need to update the plan.
Yeah,
Energy and transportation
Yeah.
and all that good stuff.
yeah, the community profile data, that is data that we provide that to town so we can, when it makes sense, we can provide you with that data. It's not, I mean, we provide basic population, economic characteristics, housing characteristics, age demographics, that type of data. And then if you're looking for a lot more data beyond that, we can point you in the right direction of where to find those resources, but there's kind of a standard set of data that we provide every town. You've probably seen the community profiles that we've done for the community, so that's something we can provide.
What about some of the goals,
Yeah,
particular energy?
Yep.
Like goals that we haven't met with
Yeah.
from 2020, we're now in 2025, and
Yeah.
certain goals that would have been met by 2025.
yeah,
And it's just, they're
Yeah.
nowhere to be found.
and Grafton has an enhanced energy plan, is that right? Yeah. So with the enhanced energy plan, those goals, they are aspirational. So there's no one that's monitoring the town's progress towards those goals. We're not monitoring it, the state isn't monitoring it. It is, right, again, it's meant as just goals for a community to have. But there is new data, energy data from the state. And as you go through the town plan update, you'll also need to update the enhanced energy plan at the same time. And so that energy data, we are working on, because we've gotten the data like the regional level data that we then need to break down for each town. So we're in the process of breaking down that data town by town, and we're prioritizing towns that are closer to updating their town plans, but that's also data that WRC would provide to Grafton just as part of, this is just part of our core services, like the community profile data as well. And the energy data, so that's not something you would need a municipal planning grant for, or a separate contract with us. We'll figure out, the timing of kind of when you would like to have that data with the town plan update. Not, the plan doesn't expire until January of 2028. For the community profile data, we use a lot of data from the census. The last one was in 2020, but then we also use data from the American Community Survey, which is done every year, but it's a 5-year rolling estimate. That data, so it's not as accurate as the census data, but it still is helpful to give you a general sense of where things are going and what the trends are. So it probably would make sense to wait a little bit to provide you with that data, just because if we provide it now, then it'll be out of date. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if we get the static data, and then for example, the enhanced energy plan,
Yeah.
and then we have to come up with our goals and
Mhm.
all that, and it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, after going through this and seeing that, okay, that's not achievable, what do we do
Yeah.
for our goals? It's, again, our goals are aspirational also.
Yeah, so there's the goals within your enhanced energy plan, and there are different requirements for the enhanced energy plan, different standards that the state has, as compared to just your town plan in general. So you're not required to have an enhanced energy plan, you're just required to have an energy element in your town plan, but a lot of towns have done what Grafton has done, which is just do an expanded energy section that qualifies as an enhanced energy plan. So you know, when I say that, when I was talking earlier about goals, I was talking specifically about the enhanced energy plan. The goals and recommended action steps in your town plan. Again, they're aspirational, but I would encourage the town to think about goals and action steps for the remainder of your town plan that are more achievable in your mind. So I think from my perspective, I don't think there's any harm in being aspirational when you come up with action steps, and but at the same time, I think you need to balance that with what can we accomplish. I mean, most of our towns are like Grafton, they're small towns, they're run primarily by volunteers, and there's only so much work that can get done in a small town. And so I think you wanna, you know, push yourselves, but also be realistic with the types of recommendations that you have in your plan. Because I think it can be very beneficial if you're able to, you know, have a few successful projects that shows the town plan is being implemented. But I wouldn't recommend having, you know, no recommended action steps in there, because I think you need to kind of have some type of plan for how you're gonna implement the goals within the town plan. But
What kind of problems would we face?
yeah,
You know, you get, you know, the notion of being more realistic, which I totally agree with. But that can go up against the state's rather
Yeah.
unrealistic goals itself,
right,
which are written in law.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
sense of how we deal with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think. I'm trying to think how to, that's a good question. I think there's a way to do it, where the state and what we're looking at, because Wyndham Regional we're the entity that's reviewing the town plans and verifying that you're meeting the statute requirements, so it's not done at the state level. And I do that town plan review and I'm looking at primarily your goals and policies, and if your goals and policies are aligned with the statewide planning goals. And yes, I'm looking too to make sure that we have at least some recommended action steps to help implement the plan, but we're not looking at kind of every single action step and how it connects to statewide goals, so.
So when we put, policies in,
Mhm.
they're really not legal tender.
They have standing, so they do have standing through state permitting process through Act 250 and through section 248 and 248A. So 248 is telecommunications and energy facilities. And then even with the Act 250 reforms that went into place last year, town plans still have that standing. And so if you get a development proposal that triggers Act 250, the town plan is considered in that process. It needs to be considered in that process. So that's definitely where it's helpful to have strong policy language, and using words like shall and must, and not consider or encourage. So it's still important to have, and especially in areas where there's kind of, primary areas of concern around natural resources, land use, things like that.
Or historic values.
Historic values for Act 250. So I get that question sometimes from towns about, well, why do we have so many policies? We're not able to implement these. And there's still a reason to have those policies for Act 250 applications. And that's a primary reason to have them there. So I think some of your policies are more meant as providing direction for, a course of action the town's gonna take, but some of the policies are more about just having standing in the state permitting process.
So developers, first thing they should be doing is looking at town plan and municipal plans.
Yeah,
If you want to say, well, Vermont.
yeah, I mean, they should, and I think good developers know to do that.
But yet we need housing and we need
Yeah,
an economy.
yeah.
The last evolution of the town plans. There was almost a get out of jail free card. Given by the way the state. Department of Public Service set up the criteria for the enhanced energy plan that allowed Wyndham County to count all the wind turbines down in Searsburg as renewable energy input into the county, and therefore the towns basically didn't have to do much of anything on their own to develop renewable energy. I believe our plan cut that input out such that our goals are trying to offset our actual consumption.
Yeah.
I'd like to hope we'll do the same in this evolution and not try to sort of piggyback on the wind turbines.
Yeah, and I think that's right, a choice towns can make. So if that's the direction Grafton wants to go in, I think that would be fine.
Another area that has recent legislation that we included, but didn't develop very rigorously in the last town plan are animal corridors and forest blocks.
Yeah,
We had maps that showed forest blocks
yeah,
that were present on one side of the road and absent on the other side in the same topography. What are these guys thinking? The basis, again, A and R.
Yep.
Their wisdom just progress, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
We, local should be able to,
mhm,
specify those. Wildlife corridors and. Getting contiguous blocks of forest.
Mhm.
Network together better than. Just the broad brush of A and R.
yeah. And I think A and R's hope, with doing the forest block and habitat connectors, I think their hope was. Because some communities have done more work on that than others, like before, that went into effect. And so, there are some towns that have already. Before A and R did their work, towns that had already mapped out those forest blocks and identified. Migration corridors and already had strong policies in their town plans, but not every town. Has that, and so I think A and R's hope was that, towns would take that mapping that they did and then build off of it, and, to your point, Eric, like. Maybe they missed something too, and so it's not, so.
We should have some input at the local level.
Yeah, to kind of build on it, and maybe there's something that should be included, and maybe, I've definitely seen a lot of examples of, areas they've identified as priority forest blocks that are within areas that have a fair amount of residential development, and it just doesn't make sense to prioritize that. And so I think there's definitely, opportunity at the local level to build on that and do your own mapping.
I was glad to see in the latest edition of the regional plan, some language that. I think I was responsible for getting in there that, talks about encouraging towns to, purchase easements.
Mhm.
Along, water courses.
Yep.
Such that we both. Improve the, water, flood resilience and provide a network for animal corridor networking.
Yeah,
And I think we've got it in our town plan, but it definitely needs to stay there.
Mhm.
And if we can get our local government, select board to agree to this sort of thing proactively, then a program of identifying, basically, easement areas on the sides of water courses.
Mhm.
Will greatly enhance that. I don't know, because it involves spending money.
right,
I don't know whether that will ever fly, but I hope it will.
yeah,
I would like to have the local option for the town to do that proactively rather than having. The Agency of Natural Resources coming down with their paintbrush and saying, hey, you can't do anything in this area, and the people that on the land. Taking more of it, what are you saying?
right. Yeah, getting an easement, there's the option to, like, provide some compensation
Right.
for that.
Yeah. Equity.
Yeah. I guess I know you've all started looking through the town plan. I mean, from my review, it seems like it's pretty solid plan. I mean, there are obviously areas that need to get updated, but do you feel as if it's kind of making tweaks here and there versus doing a more comprehensive
I would
update?
say that the major issue that's changed since that time is the tremendously increased importance of Airbnbs.
Yeah,
There are a lot of substantial changes that we see have to make in that plan, but it's
yeah,
they were there in principle before, and it's just that over time, they have to be addressed more carefully. But Airbnbs have just incorporated, and they imagine some issues.
Housing in general.
yeah.
Will the regional have data on the Airbnbs?
So I can I can point you to, I'm trying to remember the name, it's the Vermont Housing Finance Agency has, a very useful, data portal, where they collect, a whole bunch of different housing data, statewide, and, I will send you a link to it too, but,
Was it Vermont Housing
Finance Authority.
Finance? Yeah.
And if you did a Google search for Vermont Housing Finance Authority housing data, they have, they have data on, just like the types of housing, how much people are paying towards housing, seasonal, second homes versus year-round housing units, and then they also have data on short-term rentals. That data is through an outside source called AirDNA, which tracks short-term rentals, including Airbnb and VRBO. And I think that's kind of like, they have data points, month to month on short-term rentals. So you can also see how it changes over the course of the year too. But
They're tracking the actual rentals themselves
through, so AirDNA is tracking it based on what's listed on Airbnb or kind of an online platform, so, there may be those short-term rentals that are not using those online platforms, but that's probably capturing 98% of the short-term rentals.
DNA.
AirDNA, yeah. But. What was it?
You want to post?
Well, if they actually inspect about Grafton and you're gonna do it.
So I think
There's,
that's-
median wages, workers living and working in different towns, median. Yeah, it's got a whole list of things.
So they must continually update it.
They do, and they have a note at the bottom of each of those charts about, when the data is being, when it's drawn from. But you can also look at, what's helpful too, is you can look at what's happening statewide and like what's happening in towns around you to do that comparison to, with Grafton. But that's so if I'm working on a town plan and updating a housing section, that's where all my data is coming from.
Yeah.
But they're drawing data from different sources, they just aggregate them.
We're still missing the private Airbnbs that don't work for services.
Yeah, but I think most,
I'm seeing a lot of 2023 data. A little bit
Yeah.
of 2024.
so it's probably, and is that for the short-term rentals or just the other data?
Community snapshot,
Yeah,
it's a little broader maybe.
so it's probably the 2023 American Community Survey, which got released, I think, in December of 2024, so there's always some lag time with data. There's some other data sources like Vermont Department of Taxes tracks, home sales, and that can get data for 2024 by now. That's helpful too, so they have, they track data on home sales and median price of homes.
Yeah.
Which is useful.
Does have that in.
Yeah. But, yeah, so, yeah, short-term rentals are an issue across the state, and there are a number of towns in our region that have developed, short-term rental ordinances, that are just adopted by the select board. And you can go to different extents with those. Some towns have short-term rental ordinances that it's really just meant to keep or require short-term rentals to register, so the town can track short-term rentals, and in case there are issues with over occupancy or nuisance issues, they know they have a contact person to be in touch with. I believe Chester in their ordinance has sets a limit on the number of short-term rental permits that they'll issue. So,
Did the VLCT thing recently, and they said there were several lawsuits They actually recommended.
Yeah.
Seeing the outcome of those
Yeah.
before implementing,
Yeah.
a new regulation.
Yeah, I think most towns that I've worked with have just done a simple registration without setting a cap on the number. Yeah, I know some towns have set a cap on that, yeah,
Yeah, we actually have a draft and there is a proposed cap.
Yeah.
Registration, but
yeah,
hasn't gone into effect yet.
yeah. But that would be helpful to, right, include some discussion in your town plan about the need for an ordinance and kind of have that language to support it.
You know, we're actually working on one of them.
Yeah, we're gonna have it before long here.
Yeah.
But there's certainly room for a lot of discussion about
Thank
the
you.
need for housing.
We touched too many things, we opened the windows open.
I said,
We touched too many buttons and so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, obviously a priority statewide, production of more housing. And I know Grafton went through a process recently and you all were talking about at the beginning of the meeting about wastewater and we went through a process of looking at that. And that is the primary challenge for our towns that don't have wastewater or water infrastructure is you're just limited in how much additional housing you can support. I think as we all know too, that the cost of housing, the cost of construction has just gone so high. There's just a real disconnect between what it costs to build a home and what an average Vermonter can
Yeah.
afford.
The only homes being built are the
Yeah.
mega mansions
Right.
on resorts and off on
Mhm.
100 acres somewhere.
Yeah, and that's,
It was interesting,
Yeah.
we're working in New Hampshire the past few days and was over in Surrey, outskirts of Keene.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen, there's so many houses being built over there. I hadn't seen that number of houses being built in a long time.
Mhm.
And I was telling the worker that was with me, I said, I haven't seen a house being built in Vermont in probably, can't tell you.
Yeah.
But yet we saw at least 20 homes,
Mhm.
new construction.
Yeah.
Several ready to go up in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
In a vibrant community
Yeah, yeah,
that still has a lot of beautiful countryside.
yeah,
And it's sad,
yeah,
Vermont can't figure it out.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's different, different ecosystem in terms of regulations and, yeah,
But I thought about all these homes, and they were, you know, modest, probably. At least 400,000 and up.
Mhm.
And that's where they're gonna be at anyway now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
but they're within 20 minutes
Mhm.
to Keene.
Yeah.
Where there's a lot
Yeah,
of economy going in,
exactly, yeah,
business, college.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have all that here, but
yeah,
on a smaller scale, it'd be nice to see at least 1 or 2 new homes being built in small towns,
yeah,
saying that, oh, we're growing.
Yeah.
That's when we saw a new house being built. You're right.
yeah,
You
we
see
see,
that? Last one I can think of was on the Saxon River, at the edge of Corey Hill. House at the end of the cornfield,
Yeah.
that was, it's been there for at least 15 years now, and that's the last one I called Colleen,
yeah,
but.
my niece Marissa and her husband, they did build one up on the hill, about that long, yeah.
15, yeah.
About that,
yeah,
maybe not quite 12.
Most recent one I'm aware of is the Stagecoach Road in Chester, when you're taking the curve
Oh, yeah.
down the hill. That was built about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And flipped.
It is not that many houses when you're talking years.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
and Brattleboro's going through the same thing, there's nothing new down there.
no, I mean, that's, yeah, and that's kind of, right, like Brattleboro, Dummerston, Guilford, Vernon, like that's where maybe you would expect to see more, just given proximity to Brattleboro.
Yeah.
And Greenfield's not that far away.
I take it back, I do know of one new one,
Yeah.
but she's been there for at least a year. And it's the Sweet Tree Farm,
Okay.
Route 5.
Yeah,
She sold the farm
yeah,
and she built herself another house
yep,
across the street.
yeah,
And
but it,
Well, now that we think about it, more pop up, there was the one on Putnam Forest Road. That was a huge place. Couple million or so. And that was built 2 years ago, maybe. And Arlington sold, to suck a fire since then.
and where was that? Putnam Forest?
Putnam Forest Road, just past Four Chimneys, about 500 feet on the right, they built the road straight in. And the house
Past
out
Four Chimneys?
about 500 feet,
Really?
and erected a huge place.
Does Worcester know about that?
Was that the,
You
place-
can't see it,
is that the barn kind of structure? It's all open inside like a,
Yeah, I wouldn't call it like that. The barn-like structure is the one that was built about 10 years ago at the end of.
Yeah.
Of course.
yeah, I saw that online, they were trying to sell it about 5 years ago.
Okay, so how many million was it?
Sorry?
How many million?
I don't know exactly, but it was a huge place built, by someone who didn't spend any time in town as far as I know, of it. And, from what you could see without, walking up to it, it's clearly a high end everywhere. And then sold in about a year. The barn-like structure, they, literally took down a barn in New Hampshire,
Yeah, I moved it.
moved it, put it up and hung it. So that when you're inside, you're sure it's gonna fall on you. It's the oddest
I saw pictures of
architectural environment.
Wow.
Yeah, it's gigantic inside. It must be crazy to keep. That was my first thought.
Anyways, so there's been a couple places built in the last 5 years.
yeah.
So did our town plan draw that there?
No, they're off the radar.
Yeah, so that's just going, you know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, it's,
what we do.
it's a real challenge, yeah, and, yeah, in those areas with, water and wastewater infrastructure, I mean, that helps reduce portion of the cost of building new housing, so that does help, but a lot of that housing that's being done too is, receiving some sort of subsidy from the state. And then has some sort of income requirements for families that can.
Isn't Rutland doing something like that? They've got some housing going on up in the Rutland area. Middle.
Yeah. Yeah, and
there's.
I mean, there's funding from the state for, like workforce housing, lower income housing, and then also funding for missing middle housing, so. I forget the exact percentages, but it's more like people that are making between 80% and 100% of the median household income for a region. Cause that type of housing is not being built, it's just the
Yeah.
higher end housing, so
Yeah,
they're,
well, they're at the hospital there, so they've got
yeah.
other
Yeah,
sources there for income.
yeah, there seems to be more housing construction going on, and obviously like Burlington area, but into the Middlebury and Rutland, like that whole area, there just is more development, I think, there than this side of the state. Yeah,
As far as our town plan, we've gone through a few chapters and we're making a few notes of things that, oh, we can add this now. This isn't here anymore, so.
Yeah.
Just
yeah,
additions and subtractions that we're seeing along the way.
okay,
But then we came to a halt when we get to the big ones with all the data and stuff.
Yeah.
Now we did.
yeah. Well, with the energy, I can talk to our staff member at WRC who's working on the energy data just to see where he's at and where, because I think it's probably beneficial to get that data soon, the energy data. So I could see like what his timeline would be to provide you with that. With that data. I think in thinking about for a municipal planning grant, we're expecting that they'll announce the next funding round this summer, and then usually applications are due November 1st. And they make award announcements in December, and then the funding would be available beginning January 2026.
So September, you have to get it in by?
They haven't announced it yet, but November 1st is
But
what
it
it
starts in September.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, so the application was open in September. And we, WRC can provide Grafton with assistance with putting together an application that's helpful. It's helpful for the town to do kind of the first draft of it, and then, you know, I can provide some pointers before you draft the responses, but then I can come back and you make some suggestions.
You was on your radar for that?
Yeah, I will, they're already on my radar.
Well, good timing for having that
Yeah,
put toward, your assistance.
yeah, that would be good timing. I think one thing we'll want to, just I want to bring up with that application is, just from my experience, it's helpful in the application to, have a few kind of key priorities that you want to address with the town plan update. And I think it's a stronger application versus if you just say, we have to update our town plan because we're statutorily required to do it, so I think. So in my experience, right, and, you know, right now the state has a lot of priorities around, flood resilience and housing, so I think just something for us to think about, that you can write the application to speak specifically to those statewide goals. You're gonna update the whole town plan, but if you can kind of emphasize that, that helps with applications. Just because these are, they're competitive grant applications. There was just a funding round this spring, and we actually had a number of projects get awarded in our region. But like Brookline applied to do a town plan update and they did not receive funding, but Whitingham and Wilmington got funding for town plan updates. And it's, I mean, the state has scoring criteria and they only have so much money, so I'm not sure exactly how, you know, that decision is made and how everything is ranked. Grafton benefits from having a designated village center that gives you some additional points in your application. Brookline doesn't have a village center, so maybe that was part of it. And when they announce the funding opportunity, they also include in the application guidelines what their funding priorities are. And for the past few years, it has been housing, flood resilience, and I would assume that's still gonna be in there. So
There's no economy there at all. Is there even a store?
there's,
In Brooklyn?
I'm trying to, they don't have there's no stores as far as I know.
You have to go from Newfane or.
Yeah.
County.
Yeah, so,
They used to have a school. I
Yeah.
don't think it's functional.
no, now they, merged with Newfane, so they have Newbrook now.
Yeah,
But I think too, I know Grafton, there's a lot of work going on around recreational planning. So I think there's some opportunity there too to address that more in their town plan, and then an application, talk about that planning effort that's going on with,
Outdoor Alliance.
yeah.
That reminds me, Margot is gonna have something for us at our next meeting. with Regards to Outdoor Alliance.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're,
Margot from WRC. or-
no,
Another
Margot.
Margot. Yeah.
Margot,
Matt? Different program.
Megan, not Margot, Megan.
Oh, Megan.
Meg.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I know, Jeff Nugent at our office is working with the Alliance too, I know some of them happen, but. Yeah.
We'll definitely need some of his assistance.
Yes, yeah, so that, yeah. So yeah, we would include, updating the maps in an application. And I think, I mean, the fact that Grafton has a very well-known historic village center with a lot of commercial activity, I mean, there's more going on, right?
Maybe if you look at that map down there, I believe that's the one that is based on the LiDAR data.
Oh,
Yeah, very detailed.
Yeah, but I think, between now and then, I mean, I think continuing to just review the town plan and make notes about, things that have changed in town, things that aren't in there. It's good to start that process.
There's no heat taps at the folks farm, that in here.
Another issue with the Airbnb, Kathy's pointed it out there, in her comments, is that, it puts more pressure on the school populations, because one of these places that we change once and for all for anything but a family.
Sorry, Kathy, you wanna add anything?
You're muted.
You're muted.
In terms of what, the school?
Yeah,
Oh, your
I saw the
comment.
comment there, and it's important.
Yeah, if we don't get a handle on these rentals and Airbnbs and put a quota on what's happening in our village, we've lost several students and families because they have no housing. So our population right now, we're down to 31 students, kindergarten to grade 6. So
Town, or just Grafton?
this is Grafton Elementary
Just-
School.
Yeah.
But Grafton and
Yes, Grafton and
Athens combined, the number of students.
That's right, Athens and Grafton, 31.
So we're talking about 15 to 18 Grafton children between kindergarten and grade 6 then.
Possibly, yeah. I don't have all my numbers in front of me, but yes. Pretty troubling.
You know where they wound up going?
We had one Chester family leave. I'm not sure the circumstances, but they were tuitioned into Grafton. And I know of one family that left Athens area. Athens has that trailer park there, and we see frequent people coming in and out. If they have kids, they're in the school. But that's always been a problem out in Athens.
So they're short-term students.
Yeah. One family of 3 was ready to buy a house in Grafton here probably a year and a half ago, and they lost, it was a bidding war and they lost it. So I know the principal had 3 kids coming in, but that didn't happen. It would have been nice. It does affect some of the teachers, like kindergarten teachers. If we don't have enough students for kindergarten, now this year or next year, it's going to be the kindergarten kiddos that come in. I think there's only 3 projected. They'll go into the 1st and 2nd grade classroom. So it affects the program for.
Kathy, do you have a sense of how many children are being schooled at, private schools?
I don't have that number, but I do have a number of 10 that are homeschooled. And we've encouraged the staff, especially the principal, to encourage the homeschoolers to come in, even if it's for music, art, gym, or any activity, special activity that's happening, to get the kids into the school, get the families into the school to see what they do. We do some great stuff. As far as those going to private school, I know there's a number there. I just don't have it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I just wondered,
That's just K through 6, private school, are you talking about high school also?
I'm talking K to 6.
Okay.
We tuition kiddos 7th and 8th grade. They can go Leland and Gray, Chester, wherever.
I mean, it's quite possible that, you know, for Grafton in any case, that half of the, you know, primary school population is not choosing to go to the Grafton school.
Mhm.
They're here, you know, those
They're here,
kids.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, you know, how one addresses that, but, you know, part of it is maybe the issue of parents trusting the school enough to want their kids there.
Right.
Uh,
No, I think you're correct about that. I can't say more about that. I have my thoughts, but let's say we're working on it,
Yeah,
the board. That's why I encourage community involvement, especially for
Yeah.
young families. We don't have many, but to get them involved with the school.
We lose our kids, we lose our families, we lose our communities.
That's
And
true.
so, and it's not just Grafton, it's,
Yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
and the legislators need to be looking at all of this
yeah,
and not the junk that they're playing with in their little tea and crumpet meetings.
yeah,
I'm sorry,
concern.
I'll throw that in the minutes to Lester, please. I've been to lobby stuff and I see what goes on and it's just
yeah.
absolutely horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Well, you know, just to throw a monkey in the wrench, just wondering, how many towns in Vermont no longer have a school? So that it's, you know, it's almost becoming the norm. And, you know, it's just a different environment. I grew up in Barry, Vermont, you know, 10,000 people there, another 5,000 around. And between the schools there must have been 4,000 kids. I mean, everybody had huge families. We had 6, and it wasn't much about the norm. It was, you know, it's just, that's no longer the case. You've got one kid and, you know, that's it.
When we built the school, the new school, we built it for 125 students. And the students that we have, there's a high percentage of those students from both Athens and Grafton that are special ed. So what has happened with the 125 population, the building, we use every inch of that building for the 31 kiddos. And a lot of it is interventionists in special ed, speech, OT, for major classrooms that have 2 grades in them. So we use every inch of that building. It's well used. And we have a great staff. But we do have parents that want their kids at home, or they decide that they want to go to a different, still live in Grafton, but send their kids somewhere else. Frustrating.
Well, it may not be fair, but a lot of parents opting out might be interested in the school if the school provided an environment that was rich enough for what the parents feel their kids deserve. Okay.
Mhm.
2/3 of your population is special ed.
Mhm.
They're not gonna want their kids in that environment. You almost need 2 schools running side by side in that building.
Right, right. And we've also had problems with having an after-school program or even a summer program for kids. There are parents that want that. And trying to meet the needs of everybody,
yeah.
hard.
I was just gonna say too, with the municipal planning grant, as it mentioned, because it is competitive, but I'm not sure who else is gonna be applying next fall. We do get. And the state allocates a certain amount of money for each region, so it's towns within the region that are. Applying for that pool of money, so you're not applying statewide, but. I would just recommend too that the planning commission. Just kind of have a plan B if you don't get, municipal planning grant, we can still provide. Assistance, I mean, we could talk about. Just more limited work, like it's, very small scale, contract to, if there's specific chapters where it's. We really need help with the housing chapter, we could just take that on, just for example, but I think. I just wouldn't want the, I wouldn't want the planning commission to apply for the grant, not get it, and then not be kind of prepared with another backup plan, so. And like I said, we can provide the community profile data, the energy data. I'm also a resource. Like if you're looking for, pretty much every town in our region has a town plan. So if you're looking for examples of what other towns have done for housing plans or the housing chapters in their plan, I can point you to some examples to, help in that.
We're looking at chapter 6, our past student enrollment for elementary, for elementary was 31 in 2015. And our projection for 23-24 was 44.
Great big wish.
Mm.
Um,
So we dropped back 10 years. Essentially, there's students, do you recall that 10 years ago, we had a shortage also? Kathy,
Say that again, Matt?
do you recall 10 years ago, we were down to 31 also, according to our stats here.
Was that 31 Grafton residents?
It was Grafton, yeah, that was just Grafton,
Okay.
that didn't include Athens.
So now you're
You
down,
didn't include Athens?
It was 63 with both.
yeah, so, so
10 years
that,
ago.
that trend. Has been going on since generation.
Yeah. So, those are stats that are gonna come from you folks, right? Where do we get these stats from?
Is there a source at the bottom there by any chance of where it's usually from from the school district, we can get that,
Yeah, this is from the school.
probably from the
It
school district.
shows up every year,
Yeah,
our, the town report, the education part of it. It's not gonna be-
yeah.
Anything else for Matthew, for Matt?
No, but very, very helpful, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully this was helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and just now you have, put a face to a name, so if you have questions to reach out to me, and you may have seen, we have some upcoming workshops too. We have a basics of land use planning and regulation training, which unfortunately is gonna be another lunchtime thing. I asked folks a little while ago about just polling kind of planning commission members in the region if they had a preference for doing lunchtime workshop or evening thing, and most, I recognize not everyone can do a lunchtime thing, but most people do something lunchtime. That's a Wednesday, the 28th of May, but we are gonna record that, and then I'm also doing a workshop June 5th at 6 p.m. on that's on Act 181, so that's the Act 250 reforms. And just what it means for municipalities, so that information is on our website, there'll both be Zoom meetings, so the Zoom access info is on the website, but I would, especially the Act 181 workshop on June 5th, I think will be interesting.
That's at 6 P.M.
At 6 p.m. Yep.
down there.
It's just gonna be remote.
Oh,
Yeah.
those work too.
Yeah.
It's nice to put faces on. and get
Yeah.
Together in a group, so you can really,
No, I agree.
debate a little better when we're in person.
Yeah, I really, wanted to make a point of being here in person.
Yeah,
I have too many Zoom meetings.
yeah,
I struggle with them.
they're convenient
Yeah.
to a point.
Okay,
But yeah, thank you.
yeah,
Well,
Thank you.
you're welcome, and nice to meet all of you and good to see you, Eric, and just be in touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll let you get to the rest of your agenda.
yeah. Thank you. Well, we covered chapter 6 a little bit, education.
Yeah.
Want to call it?
Yeah.
Have a good night.
No, thank you. Safe travel. Thank you. $2:30. So you discussed the municipal planning. grant,
Yeah,
and we'll just,
handle that, so.
this September, we can start the application for. So it makes it better that we're doing that one, not.
Yeah, no, what I would suggest is that we put the municipal planning grant on the agenda each month. Even if we don't have much to say it for our children. Get us thinking about it, talking about it, so that we're ready to go in September.
Actually, we only got June, July, August,
Yeah, no, there's,
and then we were there,
yeah,
summer
so,
meetings, and there's probably. One there, I'm not sure if I'll make it June one or not. I'll let you guys know.
well, without, other issues bouncing up, don't necessarily, I can see us taking 1 month off in the summer. You're not gonna be in a particular meeting to choose that. This is an important item.
Yeah,
But when we do meet, we should be addressing developing that grant.
yeah.
Um,
So on town plan review, we touched on the education and the issue there. And that's definitely gonna be something to look at as we put the next plan together.
Housing a bit.
And housing with that too, yeah, rooftop housing.
On your educational piece, Matt, you might want to invite the superintendent. If you want any factual information.
Yeah. Is it gonna be good news or bad news?
Well, I don't know. I mean, with the formula that they're trying to put forth, that's gonna have a great impact, not just for our school, but all schools. And
Consolidate to 7 school districts.
what's that, Buzz?
Is that the one where they want to consolidate to the 7 school districts?
Yeah, into 5 districts,
Or 5?
or for the whole state.
Yeah.
How many districts are there now, Kathy?
100, oh gosh, over 100.
Districts?
Yeah, I mean, what they're trying to do is section off the whole of Vermont into 5 sections. And what it does for small schools is that you lose your local control. And they would have so many representatives for each of the 5 districts. It's not gonna be in place for maybe the next 3 to 5 years, but still if you listen or watch the legislature, they're passing bills now that to the Senate on this procedure. The other piece to this is that they stopped funding some federal funds to the education department for like Wyndham Northeast. Right now, we're in $1 million in the hole because they stopped the funding for some of the ARPA money that was issued. We got an extension with Biden for June of this year, and it got stopped. So we're looking at how do we pay that money if we don't get the extension they said they're gonna honor. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with the state and with the feds, and now with this formula. So kind of we're all in limbo, wondering what's gonna happen next. Not such good news.
Yeah,
Well, thanks, Kathy.
Yes.
We'll address that as we move forward. We got other
Sure.
to review
we'll solve it.
Everybody have a good night.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same here.
Thanks, Kathy.
How's Kirk doing?
Good, good. He's moving too much. He's got to slow down. But he's doing well for what, 2 weeks now, 2.5 weeks.
Nice to hear.
Yeah.
Good.
And have a good night, everybody.
Yes, thanks, Kathy.
Yeah.
On old business, Eric mentioned the water. It's been a meeting last night. That's one mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had a meeting with Emily Hackett, whose primary role is as an engineer, not as funding or administrative sort of person. She's a problem solver.
What's your department?
I don't know. That's and part of the drinking water program now. I think she shut, but she stayed with us because we had a drinking water issue as part of that grant.
Yeah,
We seem to have landed on two main potentials for the grant money. One being drinking water sampling from a geographically well dispersed or sampled area for the village. And the other part of things that we're talking about that can't be funded by the program had to do with testing of septic systems, which we're talking about folding into the septic tank pumping ordinance. So septic tanks get looked at. Inspection, yeah. There was a fair amount of discussion on whether we'd go through another whole round of engineering to be looking at drinking water sources. I don't think that's the way to spend our money. I think we should just be getting a good testing program to tell when our water quality is beginning to deteriorate. So it would provide enough motivation for the town to actually follow through with either getting a drinking water source or some sort of a wastewater system. I'm convinced the town won't do that unless we're forced by catastrophic contamination. So water testing would give you a window of time to or realize that contamination is growing and then if you could look at it, say over a period of 3 years, and see that certain kinds of contaminants are increasing, then we have to comprehensively do something about correcting the problem. There were acronyms flowing last night and they were really thick. I had a hard time following it all.
One thing we decided not to do was, do another preliminary engineer's report for drinking water system.
Yeah.
Which could draw about 80,000. Yeah. The advantage of it would be if we ever have a problem, we've got an engineer's report in place with some water testing involved with it. And the other item we could use the money for would be, securing, either an easement or purchase of a property for, future wastewater. But that's probably never gonna happen. Cost, probably more toward a
Not
drinking water.
a catastrophe.
Right.
It's a catastrophe. People are gonna figure it out. But it may be very painful.
Yeah, but just like. Brookline didn't get any money for their own town plan, would we ever get any money for catastrophe,
I don't know.
for assistance?
No, it is.
So there's 3 steps, right? One is the 2 steps. An update the septic ordinance. To add an inspection timeline. And then water testing. And get a company that's gonna come in and. Do the testing for us. And do it over a period of time.
Yeah, and we're hoping to be able to get PFAS tests.
That's
done.
the key.
Interesting, I asked Emily how much a PFAS test cost these things. She said around $500. I can't believe that won't come down in the future because there's enough contamination throughout the environment, everywhere.
So
People are gonna wanna know how to do that and probably the test costs will come down, maybe a factor too. So.
So right now, what would be a ballpark figure for, testing of each individual property, one property? You're doing that $500 and everything else that's involved.
Well,
There's 120 homes.
No, but I'm just wondering per home cost. So,
I don't think we have to.
Yeah.
Test 120 homes. I think we could get a good sampling. Of the underlying aquifer of the village of. Maybe a dozen. homes.
what would that cost about?
Oh, standard water,
6,000 for you just.
yeah, a standard water test costs maybe a couple $100. A really basic one, maybe 150. And the PFAS right now is running 500. Yeah, I can't believe that won't come down over a period of years, but right now, yeah. $1,000.
So that you could test. And I'm just thinking, blocks in the sense of, nothing imaginative, but, so, 12 sites would be enough to do
I'm
a
guessing,
good job. Okay, I'm not thinking about how do you save money on this and shave things off. Maybe 20 sites would be a bit, maybe
Yeah.
there needs some evaluation. How many
it
sites
is,
so you can say, okay, there's a really good confidence level, if you haven't missed anything.
upfront, it needs the guidance of a hydrologist.
Yeah. So you have that. And then you can, so say it's 20 sites. Sounds like it's less than $20,000 to do it.
Yeah,
and then your expert to point the way. I'm just wondering if it's something, think about putting in the town budget, you know, to say, look at. This will give us some confidence, some relief from worries,
well, I'm hoping that we can. Get a contract that uses all of the, or a good portion of the grant. So that if this testing is carried out over a period of, 5 or 10 years.
Yeah,
But we have to spend it by August 1st of 26.
August 31st.
August 31st of 26. But to Eric's point, we get a contract with someone who, a company that would say, yeah, we'll do it over the next 6 years.
but we use the money that we
Yeah.
spend before that.
Yeah.
That August date, actually.
And Emily sort of squirmed a little bit on
She
that
did.
one, but
I think it's possible.
yeah,
Well, you could even, worst case scenario. You do it for a couple years. Are things in place? I'm sorry, I'm not on top of it, but are things in place you could start this year?
yeah, we wanna get going as
So
soon as
you
possible.
could have 25 and 26, and then, seeing on that data, you might be able to make a case for putting in a bit of money to keep it going.
Well,
Given the town budget, it's not a huge expense. It's not even gonna add a penny to the tax rate, but it will, it can address a lot of potential.
are you proposing not to use the grant money?
Oh, no, I'm just saying, you use the grant money, but what you're suggesting to me is it may not be possible to extend. A multi-year testing regime based on the grant money.
Well, if we can, as I said, get a contract that guarantees that into the future, 5 or 10 years
Is
is.
accepted by, there may be a problem, a legal problem with that.
There may be,
Okay. So it's worthwhile investigating.
yeah, and Emily's an engineer, she's not the grant administrator types. Legal people.
Thanks.
So there's again, subject ordinance, update, water testing, those two things we. Morgan's already worked on. Following up on all this. She was gonna contact, who was it she was gonna contact? I'm gonna try to get hold of Mark, Johnson from RCAP. I don't know if you recall, we had a gentleman who came in. Maybe 2 years ago, RCAP, John. I gotta find his name
I know who you mean. but
and
yes.
contact him, see how they can help us possibly with the water testing. They can't do
It's a
it,
rural something or other,
yeah. Yeah, so,
rural communities, whatever.
your rural community assistance.
Anyways,
Program, yeah.
I remember the discussion.
Yeah. So the goal is to try to get, the water testing done as quickly as we can to. Get some testing done. We did discuss. We get the, 75 in the village, we've got. 20 in Holtonville and 20 in. Airport homes,
Most of the pumpers,
yeah, but follow the pumping ordinance. With the water testing,
don't have to.
you don't have to. Just the pumping ordinance follows everybody. So if we ask to have everyone do an inspection, it's gonna be everyone who's on the ordinance. Okay, I'll send that. Any other road business?
River Aware. cell phone app for
Hmm,
flooding. I've made initial contact with the app developer, actually had some email conversations with the engineer associated with it today. Hope to have more information. The next meeting, they recognize that in an area like we have with no stream being in, there's basically no data in, so getting data out of an app is going to be very useful. But, in my last reply to her, I mentioned talked about the Tempest, commercial weather stations that are
Mhm.
all around. We'll see if, she bites on that as being a possible, source of sensor data.
mhm.
Because really what we need is a rate of rainfall, sensor.
Right.
And the headwaters. Rivers.
You wanna keep that, moving, timeline here for us to keep,
Yeah, I think it should be. As also, you can get your friend that had the PFAS mediation,
yeah,
program. Wherever it is, Texas.
yeah, that Texas A&M. Like I said, last year she was ill, I think she's still under the weather, because I haven't been in touch with her yet, be sure she doesn't come again. I'm afraid there's something. Yeah, what's going on there, yeah,
Yeah.
but I'll hear from her at some point. Get that information. That was the study being done at Texas A&M on PFAS with plants. Absorbing them.
Yeah.
Um, And then I have, I guess maybe old business, new business, National Water Model progress update, just send you the email on how to look at it at your leisure. And then, Morgan also sent out, the engineering, 30-day engineering models and draft flood insurance rate map.
I didn't see that. Is that today?
This was, yeah,
Okay, I'm not.
yesterday. It was from yesterday.
Sent out that laws.
No, it went to Morgan. Bill Kearns. And this is Savetto, somehow I was on the list. Want to forward that also?
Yeah, because I don't recognize that. It is certainly something that we need to pay attention to. I think this is the thing that Bill warned us about, to be vigilant about responding to.
Because you want to use the Grafton, Vermont. Select board, right? Email.
Good. Please. Kind of helps to have a separate inbox for it, so. Surprisingly, a lot of mail coming in there.
Yeah, I've got too much coming into my. I moved everything from my business email to my personal email. But I'm also mixing business into my personal email, and it's all, oh my God.
We still have that email, it's Red Dog.
Or,
Or not.
that's Anita's, yeah. I guess that's everything, any other new business? Public comment? Next meeting is June 10th. I will we'll see how I'm doing, going in for a hip replacement. Ooh. Next 2 weeks,
And how long will that take you out of commission?
hopefully not long.
Try to get you in and
I
out.
should be able to look at.
Try to get you in and out as quickly now, don't they?
Hmm.
Try to-
Yeah, that should be in good shape. Rich did pretty well with it, he was in really rough shape. I'm still working through mine. Some days
Where are
it's
you
good,
at?
some days it's bad. Dartmouth. I tore my leg when playing hockey. And it did it off. Time for a new one, too much arthritis.
One of them is the cartilage cup that basically holds things in place.
Mhm.
Rip it, and then the joint becomes loose.
And full of arthritis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Have you had one, hip replacement?
Yeah,
Yeah, you sure you did.
yeah. And you're having the right time, you're having it done
From the front.
From the front,
Yep.
and, that will get you in and out the same day, and you'll be able to walk the next day.
Yeah.
Actually, you'll be able to walk the same day.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
pretty remarkable.
There's some days if I'm going in cadence, I'm okay. Start up a hill, and it starts to get painful. I'm sitting too long. It's sore.
So it's not just old age, because I'm just sore all over the place, but I'm, you know,
Mm.
79, so I'm not expecting
Yeah,
anything else.
no, this is when they injury. Who knows when?
Yeah.
Plus all the skiing I do. And finally done. But I don't wanna struggle with it anymore, just get it done. My leg's strong.
Oh, yeah.
So, and regardless of, I should be okay by then.
Yeah.
So for an agenda, our next agenda, we'll just keep a few things rolling along.
Well, you know,
Anything
that
else?
municipal planning grant in front of us, so that
Yeah,
can't ignore it too long. When you think about it, June, July, August, September. October. 5 meetings. You know, done.
I know Luke said he could make the next June one, so let's try to all be together at least for that one and then decide if we want to skip July and.
Yeah.
And pick it up.
I'm not proposing that we skip, I'm just saying, you know, that
There's nothing
there's
urgent.
no need to search for items if there isn't anything that really needs to be brought forward.
Yeah. I do need to, you know, everyone's help following up on this stuff and move forward. You know, there's some of the things we talk about each meeting and. Put it in a folder and it's like, after on a Saturday or Sunday, kind of do a little work on it, then it gets put away and.
Yeah.
You guys don't pay me enough to be the chair. You know, I want 6 figures.
You want 6 figures? Yeah. Sure.
All zeros?
Yeah. Thanks.
Using,
If you soften it, it'd be 00010.
yeah. Depends which, you know. Point is, in which country you wanna take the 6 figures from, but. Some of those don't add up.
Yeah.
Are we adjourned?
Yes.
Yeah.
John, perfect, thank you. Oh, yeah, motion to adjourn?